The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 91. Rain, since you have so much money in that card of yours, why don't you treat us? That's right. What's the difference between 10,000 and 100,000? You're the secretary of Xander Corporation now. You're such a talented person. I'm sure you wouldn't mind, right? After hearing Evelyn's suggestion, the dazed students immediately followed suit. Evelyn had a smirk on her face the entire time. Now, she was just waiting for Rain to settle the bill so she could ask the bank that issued the credit card to collect her debt immediately. What would Rain do then? I've already said that I'm only paying 10,000. I take back what's left over, or you'll top up the amount you need yourself. You agreed to it. Rain was no longer trying to be polite. Plus, I didn't touch anything except for that glass of juice, and I especially did not touch the Lafitte. I've already paid a fortune for that glass of juice. Rain spoke sonorously while Shelby and the others rolled their eyes. They were unable to refute, so they looked to Evelyn for help. Evelyn chuckled bitterly. Rain, this wouldn't have happened if you had not paid 10,000. You're the problem. If that's the case, this wouldn't have happened if you all didn't organize this gathering, right? Rain responded coldly. Rain, I'm telling you, I'll only let you leave here if you pay the bill, and if you don't. Do you see that stage over there with the girl dancing on it? You'll have to go up and dance. Evelyn tore her apart to avenge her brother. Rain was not afraid at all. On the one hand, she was utterly disappointed with these people. On the other hand, she had recognized Kiran's back when Serena was speaking earlier. With Kiran here, what could she possibly be afraid of? Evelyn, don't think I don't know that you were involved in Mitchell's attempt to kidnap me. I'll never forget it. Everyone's faces changed when they heard about the kidnapping, and they looked toward Evelyn questioningly. Rain, you bitch! I haven't gotten my revenge on you for killing my brother. Evelyn was full of rage. When Rain heard that Mitchell was dead, she had many questions. She immediately looked at Kiran's, forgetting how to speak. Shelby and the others were overjoyed that they had this grudge against each other. Evelyn was definitely going to make Rain pay, which gave them peace of mind. Rain, I didn't think that you'd be such a bitch. You mean a murderer. Evelyn, you better call the police to arrest her. The crowd started to get out of control. Rain saw how calm Kiran was, which reassured her. Then she glanced at all these people. I paid off 10,000 for you, and you dare say those things to me? What else are we supposed to say? It's the truth, you bitch. Nyla cursed loudly. Rain was actually angry now. Rain, you better pay up, otherwise we'll take action, Evelyn warned her mercilessly. I don't care. Rain stood up and walked to Kiran. You better sit down. Evelyn pushed Rain to the ground. Security, over here! The security guard had heard the commotion long ago, so when he heard Evelyn's voice, he immediately ran over while shouting, Miss Evelyn! She's refusing to pay, so put her up on stage to do a strip show for us, Evelyn said menacingly. That's your debt, Rain retorted angrily. Miss, just do whatever Ms. Evelyn says. Don't make things harder than they need to be. The security guard did not think that he was direct enough, so he added, Neptune's Cove Karaoke has shares in the Quinn family? I'm sure you know what to do. When Shelby and the others heard that, their eyes lit up with surprise. Rain was slightly taken aback, but she immediately shook her head. I'm not paying. I already paid 10,000 and made it clear to the waiter. Chapter 92. Did she? Evelyn looked at the waiter and asked her. How could the waiter possibly dare defy Evelyn? She instantly shook her head. Nope. I heard that she was the one paying the bill. You're talking nonsense. The good-natured Rain was about to go crazy. It's the truth. We're the witnesses. Shelby and the others were ecstatic as they inwardly praised Evelyn for her quick wit. Rain, I didn't think you'd be such a devious woman. You've really disappointed us. Everyone can testify that you caused all of this, so just pay the bill, Evelyn sneered. You're lying! Rain's pretty face had turned pale with anger. She reckoned that Snow had only given Kiran 10,000 this month, which was why he said to spend 10,000. She could not spend any more, so she said firmly, I don't have any money. No money? Evelyn scoffed. That makes things easy then. You can just go on stage and strip while pole dancing. I'm sure that the audience can give you 100,000. Everyone else was thrilled to hear that, so they all nodded and said, That's right. The prettiest girl in Bayville University is about to go viral. Rain, you better hurry up. I'm sure those men would love to take a look at your body. Heh, Nyla added while laughing ecstatically. Everyone else's faces were also full of glee, as if Rain were about to feed a class full of excited dogs. Rain's complexion turned pale, and she was trembling with anger. I'm warning you not to go too far. Otherwise, my brother is not going to spare any of you. Your brother? Shelby laughed out loud. Do you mean your boyfriend? Where is he? I'm sure many people here would love to be your boyfriend, but I bet you'd have to sleep with them first. Tesk, tesk. I didn't know you're such a slut, Nyla said while clicking her tongue. Ha ha. Everyone else burst out laughing. Crash. Suddenly, the sound of objects hitting interrupted the sound of laughter. Ouch! Shelby screamed as he held his head with both hands. His face was covered in either wine or blood as he looked around blankly. Kiran, that's my Lafitte. Serena's beautiful eyes were spitting fire as she grumbled in a flirtish manner. Kiran ignored Serena as he looked at the students. Nyla did not recognize Kiran. Instead, she cursed at him angrily, seeing as he was alone. You're finished. How dare you hit Mr. Shelby? Kiran appeared in front of Shelby like a ghost as he raised his hand to slap him twice. Here comes another. Here comes another. He said those 3 words calmly, yet they held so much power. You... Nyla was so terrified by Kiran's gaze that she quickly backed away and looked at Evelyn for help. Ms. Evelyn, hurry up and call someone. Evelyn was stunned to see Kiran. Then, she was reminded of her grandpa's warning not to anger Kiran for the next 7 days. However, the thought of Kiran exposing her scandal made her lose control as the blood rushed to the top of her head in anger. Mind your own business. Mind my own business? Kiran sneered. I was the one who saved Rain from being kidnapped by your brother. Didn't your grandfather tell you? The thought of Mitchell's death frightened Evelyn, so she backed away. Kiran glanced at the other students. You're already enjoying the meal Rain paid for. All of you eat human food, yet you behave like animals. The students were furious about what Kiran said, but after seeing the way he hurt Shelby and made Evelyn afraid of him, they all backed off without a word. Then, Evelyn noticed Mr. Onyx coming down the stairs and saw a glimpse of hope. Onyx Kirkland, destroy him. Chapter 93. Onyx was momentarily stunned. He had rushed downstairs after hearing reports from his subordinates. He never would have thought that Evelyn would be asking him to destroy Kiran. Onyx would not even lay a finger on Rain, let alone Kiran. Kiran had been protecting Rain and her mother for God knows how long, so how could he ever mess with her? The sight of Onyx being caught in the middle put a smirk on Kiran's face. He looked at Onyx and his lackey as he pointed to the ground. Are you going to lie down or kneel? It's your choice. Lie down or kneel. No one could believe their eyes. Evelyn did not know that Kiran could easily beat multiple people from Neptune's Cove. Karaoke, so she was furious. Who was he to say something like that? Kiran, it should be you making a choice. Evelyn turned to look at Onyx. Break every single one of his limbs and make him lie on the ground to lick my shoes. As for Rain, find someone to screw her. She still had more steam to blow off, so she looked at Kiran and threatened him. You idiot! How dare you speak like that to an employee of glorious security? Do you have a death wish? Death wish? I guess I do. Kiran raised his voice all of a sudden. His menacing and murderous demeanor was like a reenactment of the previous incident at Neptune's Cove karaoke. The lackey next to Onyx felt his heart shudder. Thump! Someone went weak in the knees and knelt right in front of Kiran. After one got to his knees, the others did the same, like a chain reaction. He actually kneeled. Plus, his posture was as straight as an arrow. Kiran got him to kneel with just a few words. Evelyn looked like she had just seen a ghost. She looked at everyone around her and shouted in exasperation, Why are you kneeling? Get up now and kill him. However, no one dared to stand up. On the contrary, their backs got even straighter. Evelyn looked at Onyx furiously. Hurry up and make them. Before she could finish her sentence, she put her hand over her mouth in shock. Onyx had kneeled too. Everyone was on their knees. Onyx and his dozens of men were kneeling on their ground in fear of Kiran. It was like a single military general scaring off thousands of troops in battle. The mighty Kiran, the fearsome Kiran. Kiran was a god. That was it. God was the word to describe him best. It was pin-drop silent, and even the onlookers covered their mouths for fear of accidentally screaming. No one expected this to happen. "You." Evelyn finally calmed down her breathing and looked at Kiran. Her face turned pale at the thought of her grandfather's warning as she struggled to form a coherent sentence. "I'm Mr. Kiran," Kiran said haughtily. Evelyn's fragile body trembled, and she was afraid to talk back. Kiran sneered. "Evelyn, how about I give you a chance?" Evelyn felt like she was being preyed on by a wild beast. What kind of chance?" Her voice trembled, and her heart was in turmoil. She felt that if she refused to obey, she would die on the spot. Kiran raised a finger and pointed to the stage. "Go on stage, strip, and pole dance." Evelyn was speechless. Was this not what she asked Rain to do earlier? Rain did not do it, but now she had to. At the thought of her reputation, Evelyn shook her head like a rattle. In your dreams. Are you making me repeat myself?" Kiran interrupted her ruthlessly. Every nerve on Evelyn's body seemed frozen, as if the Grim Reaper had just paid her a visit. "Miss Quinn, do as he says," Onyx urged her with a pale face as he kneeled on the ground. Evelyn was the daughter of the respected Quinn family. Although she was wild, she was not the type of woman to stoop to doing such performances, especially not stripping and pole dancing. Her eyebrows knitted together in anger as she said angrily, "Shut up, you!" Chapter 94. "Have you forgotten your family's warning?" Onyx reminded her urgently. Evelyn immediately shut her mouth, and her face looked puzzled. Kiran had made the heads of the three big families fear him. If even Grandpa feared him, who was she to disobey? Fear stirred in her heart. Kiran ignored Evelyn and looked at Rain's other classmates. "All of you too, huh?" Nyla and the others backed away in fear as they subconsciously looked at Evelyn. "Evelyn, you better gather them up now. I don't have time for nonsense." Kiran clasped his hands behind his back as his powerful aura radiated from him. Evelyn felt like a leaf in the wind, and Kiran seemed to have destroyed her with a single breath. The entire place was silent. All eyes were on Evelyn and the other girls. Some men had a hint of expectation in their eyes, too. Rain's eyes twinkled as she looked at Kiran. He could not be any cooler than this. Shelby was initially furious after getting hit, but when he saw Onyx kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy, he knew he was no match for him. He was filled with fear, and when he remembered that Nyla had started all this, he lifted his arm to slap her across the face. "Bitch, stop wasting time." "Huh?" Nyla cried out in pain from the slap, and she looked at Shelby in horror. She never would have expected that the man she had been sucking up to would be so cruel to her just to save himself. Evelyn knew there was nothing else she could do, so she took a couple of deep breaths and stared at Kiran with hatred in her eyes. However, the thought of Mitchell's death frightened her, so she stomped onto the stage. She moved. Nyla and the others were completely terrified, but they were nobodies compared to Evelyn, so they had no choice but to go up too. Just moments ago, she was as proud as a peacock, but now she was as miserable as a chicken. On the contrary, Rain looked like an elegant swan next to her. It was their choice to live such an unscrupulous life. Kiran had no sympathy for them at all. Evelyn and the others stood on the stage with the spotlight shining directly on them. The gazes of the men below them made them feel like prostitutes. Absolutely mortified, they reluctantly started dancing. "Put more energy into it. You look like your dead ancestors," Kiran said coldly to Evelyn and the girls. They almost went crazy from the pent-up anger inside of them. Rain was the one who was supposed to be on stage. Now, it was the complete opposite. "Where's the music? Cue it!" The villainous Serena's sweet voice sounded as she started swaying her body passionately, instantly livening up the mood. "Cue the music!" the man in the audience shouted impatiently. There was whistling and shouting. Everyone was starting to crave the wild atmosphere of karaoke. Men were going crazy with desire, whereas Evelyn and the others could barely think straight. They were out of their minds. However, they had made a choice. "Let's go!" Serena looked at everyone on stage before swaying her head and flipping her beautiful chestnut hair as she danced more passionately. "Let's go!" Evelyn and the others were filled with anger, but there was nowhere for them to hide. She would rather die than fulfill Kiran's request, yet she had no guts to actually die. This was just the beginning, as the real revenge had yet to come. The villainous Serena took out her phone and raised it above her head while dancing. Say hi to the live broadcast. Post it on social media. Share it in the group. The three shouting voices seemed to have awakened the beast in the men as they all took out their phones. Then Kiran's gaze fell upon Shelby, whose eyes were sparkling. Chapter 95. Shelby was engrossed in the performance on stage, thinking he was safe. As he watched Evelyn and the others do striptease and pole dancing, he could not help swaying to the music too. Feeling Kiran's gaze on him, he quickly stopped and regarded him fearfully. Kiran's lips curved up, and he looked at Onyx kneeling on the ground. They spent $980,000. My sister paid $100,000, which leaves a balance of $880,000. Onyx was already infuriated after seeing Rain being bullied, and he immediately understood what Kiran wanted. He stood up and looked at Shelby. Which of you will be paying the bill? The bill? Shelby glanced toward the stage. I thought we didn't have to pay if they danced. Idiot. Onyx raised his hand and slapped him. Didn't Ms. Quinn say that she would get tips from the audience? Since no one's giving any tips, who's going to pay the bill? Shelby covered his stinging cheek, too terrified to speak, trembling all over. The rest of the students fell quiet, looking at Shelby with bewilderment. Don't have money? Onyx shot his men a look. Deal with them. The lackeys, already tired from kneeling, scrambled to their feet, glad they finally had a reason to stand. Each of them grabbed hold of a student as if they were catching pigs. Shelby and the group were so frightened that they collapsed onto the floor, and some even peed themselves. Well, we'll pay, Shelby shouted frantically, fearing for his life. The other students echoed him. 1 million, Onyx glowered menacingly. I expect it to be paid within half an hour. Scared witless, Shelby and the others fumbled for their phones and started making calls to borrow money. Kiran did not feel an ounce of pity for them. They deserved it. A multitude of calls later, they finally managed to scrape together enough money, just in time for the striptease and pole dancing on stage to come to an end. Just then, Kiran glanced at Evelyn and the others on the stage. You still have clothes on, huh? Take it all off, Serena started shouting. Take it all off! Take it all off! Take it all off! They exclaimed and hastily covered their underwear, the final fig leaves concealing their nakedness. The men in the audience howled in unison like beasts, their blood boiling with excitement. Evelyn and the performers blanched, utterly dumbfounded. Eventually, Evelyn mustered the courage to look at Kiran. I thought you said we only needed to dance. I said you needed to strip and dance, but you aren't done stripping yet. Kiran jeered. Evelyn felt chills run down her spine. If she stripped, the Quinn family's reputation would go down the drain. Enraged, she decided to take her anger out on Shelby. Shelby Stone, you bastard! If your dad, Silas Stone, hadn't conspired with Zenith Fableman to help Barry get his hands on Rain, this wouldn't have happened. You dragged us all into this. That's right. This was all Shelby's plan, Nyla chimed in, afraid of being beaten up like Shelby. The other women turned to Kiran, weeping pleadingly. Shelby's the one you should take revenge on. A restraining collar seemed to have been forced on Shelby, who had just paid the bill. He stood rooted to the spot, pale and quaking. As Rain finally realized that everything had been a ploy all along, rage colored her face. However, it all disappeared when Kiran patted her gently on the shoulder. Kiran snickered at Shelby. From tomorrow onwards, I no longer want to see your old man at Bayville University. Gulp. Shelby's throat bobbed as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He did not dare to speak, but he was filled with despair. If his dad were no longer in Bayville University, he would become a nobody. However, Kiran was so powerful that even Onyx and Evelyn surrendered to him. He was so overwhelmed with regret that he would rather end himself right then. In the end, he fell to his knees before Kiran, but Onyx kicked him in the face before he could speak. Drag him out! Poor Shelby was hauled out like a dog. Those who harmed others ultimately brought harm to themselves. Satisfied with how Onyx handled the situation, Kiran looked at Evelyn on the stage. Since you testified to Zenith Fableman's heinous crimes, I'll spare you today. If you ever bully Rain again, I'll parade all of you naked in the streets. Evelyn's stomach churned with dread, and she nodded repeatedly. Nyla and the others were already crying tears of relief. as if they'd been given a reprieve. Although Kiran did not continue to terrorize Evelyn, he highlighted her betrayal of Zenith Fableman. To defeat the three big families, internal strife was just as important. From now on, he was going to kindle conflict within the families. Today, he was presented with the perfect opportunity to drive a wedge between the Quinn and Ziegler families. Chapter 96. Zenith Fableman would not be happy at being betrayed. Kiran took Rain's hand. "Let's go!" Rain inclined her head and followed him, happiness on her face. Onyx waved a hand, and one of his subordinates immediately brought over a bank card. "Mr. Kiran, here is the 1 million they spent today. Please accept it." Pleased with Onyx's acting skills, Kiran nodded and took the card. "Your waitress needs a little disciplining." His eyes passed over the waitress who had helped Evelyn give false evidence. The waitress was appalled to learn that she had not been exempted from blame and started backing away in terror. "Take her away." Onyx did not spare her. At once, his men advanced toward the waitress and dragged her outside. Soon, the cries of a woman were heard. Kiran led Rain out of the karaoke bar. She threw her arms around him, overcome with emotion, while he gazed at her affectionately. She was a strong girl but had been through a lot of hardship. "From now on, I'll protect you." Rain nodded profusely, her eyes wet with tears. She was finally in his arms after what had seemed like a lifetime of searching for him in her dreams. She did not regret loving him. He was worthy of her love. Ahem. Serena cleared her throat. "Mr. Kiran, how about I work for you from now on?" Surprised, Kiran cocked an eyebrow. "I think you should just stick with Snow." "No, Mr. Kiran." Serena quickly caught hold of him and pulled him closer. "If I work for you, I can get free meals and front-row seats to all kinds of drama. Isn't that just so cool? I think you're really becoming my idol." Kiran was well aware that she was no ordinary woman. Without another word, he started to lead Rain away. "Mr. Kiran, I have a car. I can drive you home." Serena grabbed his arm. "You're drunk," he reminded her. "I knew you cared for me." Serena moved to throw herself coquettishly into Kiran's arms. Kiran knew that this woman's skittish attitude was all an act. He smirked when he remembered that her black nails were filled with lethal poison. "All right then, I'll take your car." "Follow me." She spun on her heel in delight, swaying her hips as if she were beckoning to him. Rain glanced at Kiran uncomfortably. Kiran nodded and walked to the car. Serena unlocked her car, and the lights of the Maserati flashed twice. Kiran could not help feeling increasingly curious about this woman. How could Xander Corporation's human resources director be so rich? Serena started the car. "Are you heading back to Marina Breeze Court, Mr. Kiran?" Kiran nodded. "What about Rain?" Serena asked. "Same place," Kiran replied. "Wow," Serena exclaimed. "I knew you were a real man. Do you still need a sugar baby?" Kiran shot her a disapproving look, knowing that she was going to offer up herself. Rain blushed furiously. However, Kiran's grip on her hand calmed her down significantly. They got into the car and Serena drove off. She sneaked a peek in the rearview mirror from time to time and was puzzled to see Kiran showing Rain a great deal of concern. Upon arriving in the neighborhood, Kiran noticed the lights were on in Snow and Margaret's rooms. The former was waiting for him, while the other was waiting for Rain. He turned to Serena. "Thank you. No biggie. You're always welcome to ride in my car." Serena beamed at him. Was she interested in him? What for? Kiran was skeptical. Pretending not to have picked up on her hint, he led Rain upstairs. They had just arrived at the elevator when Rain's phone rang. Seeing that it was from an unfamiliar number, she quickly answered it. Adrian's anxious voice came from the other end. "Dr. York, I apologize for disturbing you at this hour." Remembering that Kiran had used her phone to call Adrian in the morning, Rain quickly passed the phone to him. "It's Dr. Lane." Kiran had a favorable impression of Adrian, so he took the call. "Is something the matter, Dr. Lane?" "Dr. York, I have an important patient here with a very serious condition. Can you come and help treat him?" Adrian asked. After Adrian readily sold his house earlier that day, Kiran had formed a positive opinion of his character. "Sure. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance of Bayville Hospital," Adrian quickly informed. "Got it." Kiran hung up and looked at Rain. "Go on upstairs. I need to head to Bayville Hospital for a bit." Rain nodded. "Be careful." Kiran turned around and headed for the exit to catch a taxi. Just then, A car flashed its lights, and then Serena's Maserati pulled up in front of him. Well, aren't our minds in sync? Chapter 97. Take me to Bayville Hospital. Kiran opened the door and got into her car. You're not going out to have fun with me? Serena sounded crestfallen. What kind of fun? Kiran asked. I thought you wanted to go somewhere quiet with me, and then... Although Serena did not finish, her eyes glittered with excitement and deep desire. Once again, Kiran was rendered speechless. This woman really had a wild imagination. The craziest thing was, she was bold enough to say it out loud. I know your marriage to Miss Snow is just on paper. Serena kept her eyes trained forward. When she did not hear Kiran's answer, she continued, As for Rain, you only think of her as your sister. Kiran's curiosity toward this woman grew. She was just too smart and cunning. What a scary woman. She was so scary that he felt that he needed to stay away from her. Why don't you consider me? I promise I can be a perfect partner. Serena gave him a sidelong look, smiling brightly. I don't know what you're doing in Xander Corporation or why you're seducing me like this, but I'm reminding you. Don't you dare do anything to harm Snow and Rain, or Mill hunt you down no matter where you are. Kiran decided to drop all pretenses and warned her. What are you saying, Mr. Kiran? That hurt my heart. Here, feel it. Serena whined and reached for Kiran's hand. However, he seized hers first and studied her black nails. They glinted alluringly under the streetlights, but they also looked like beasts with their jaws wide open. You like black nails? Then I'll paint my nails black from now on. I guarantee they'll drive you crazy. Serena was still simpering. I'm probably the first man to touch these hands, aren't I? Kiran said icily, letting go of her hands. Tesk. You're really falling for me, aren't you? Wouldn't you want to know more? Serena winked at him. Stop playing tricks in front of me. I'm not interested, Kiran scoffed. How about you play with me any way you want? Would you like that? Serena leaned close to him, her warm breath grazing his ear. I don't want the headlines tomorrow to be about us dying as a couple. Kiran shifted his eyes to the road ahead, reminding her to concentrate on driving. Hee. Serena giggled coquettishly. As expected of you, Mr. Kiran, I promise you'll fall in love with me. She straightened up and focused on driving. Kiran remained silent for the rest of the journey, but he concluded that this woman was far from naive. She was definitely a woman with a hell of a backstory. 20 minutes later, Serena pulled up outside the hospital. I'm afraid I can't wait here for you, Mr. Kiran. Kiran nodded and got out of the car. Serena drove off. The instant she drove away, an unreadable gleam appeared in her bewitching eyes. Kiran York? A handsome guy with a nice name? Hee. Her laughter echoed in the car, exuding a charm that sang to the fantasies of men. A beautiful woman, a beautiful car. Would a beautiful story unfold from this? When Kiran entered the lobby, he spotted Adrian pacing back and forth, anxiety written all over his face. Catching sight of Kiran, he hurried over and stretched out a hand to him. I'm terribly sorry for disturbing you at this hour, Dr. York. Kiran inclined his head slightly. It's all right. There's a casualty whose limbs have all been broken and in critical condition. We tried for more than 10 hours to resuscitate him, but we still couldn't save him, so I thought of you. Adrian filled him in on the situation while leading the way. Kiran raised an eyebrow at the news, and a name came into his mind. Barry Fableman. Is he Barry Fableman, the son of Zenith Corporation's CEO? You know him? Adrian stopped in his tracks and asked, perplexed. I broke his limbs, Kiran replied coolly. Huh? Adrian stared at Kiran, flustered and mortified. He could not believe that he had just requested Kiran to treat his enemy. He hit my mother and tried to molest my sister, Kiran explained flatly. Adrian winced in embarrassment. He had seen Margaret and Rain before and knew they were honest, good people. Clearly, Barry was the villain here. Dr. York, I'm so sorry. If I'd known about this, I wouldn't have troubled you. After hesitating briefly, Adrian added, You can forget about helping me then. Sensing the genuineness in Adrian's apology, Kiran inquired calmly, What would you get out of treating him? Adrian immediately blushed with embarrassment, but he answered frankly, I'm trying to secure a promotion to deputy director. It's kind of a critical time, so when this casualty came in, I wanted to perform well. That's why I suggested seeking your help. Kiran nodded. You're a sensible person, Dr. Lane. I'll help you. Adrian gaped at Kiran in astonishment. The next second he said, "You don't have to pay me for the house anymore." Kiran shook his head. "This is this. That is that. I'm helping you because of your character. If a person like you is promoted, Bayville Hospital will have one more conscientious doctor and leader in the future." Adrian was taken aback by his explanation. As he stared at the young man before him, he was suddenly at a loss for words. This young man had a mystifying charisma about him, though I'm not sure if the Fableman family wants me to treat Barry. Kiran continued walking. Adrian guided Kiran to the emergency room on the 6th floor. There were many people standing at the door. A woman was crying, and next to her was a tall man with a grim face, his brows furrowed gravely. When the man spotted Adrian, he hurried over to him. "Dr. Lane, has the miracle doctor you mentioned arrived?" Adrian was troubled. How was he supposed to introduce Kiran, the very person who had injured Barry? "That would be me." Kiran stepped forward. "You—" Zenith instinctively took a step back. He had seen Kiran at the banquet the night before and heard from Alfred that Kiran had injured Barry. If the culprit had been someone else, he would have sent someone after him right away. At this moment, learning that Kiran was the miracle doctor filled him with rage and hatred. "You don't need me to save your son?" Kiran smirked at the dumbfounded expression on Zenith's face. "Get out," the weeping woman screeched. Kiran's gaze slid to her, and he swiftly inferred that she was Helena Ziegler, Barry's mother and Zenith's wife. Instead of leaving, he strode up to her and slapped her on the face without warning. There was no hesitation in his actions at all, which shocked everyone present. "Go on, keep yelling at me if you want to die." Zenith's mouth fell open when he saw Kiran hit his wife. "Ah." Helena covered her throbbing cheek, her eyes blazing with fury. "Go ahead and yell at me if you're not scared of dying." Kiran's contemptuous gaze passed over the people around him. Helena and Zenith were frozen in disbelief. Adrian was also stunned by Kiran's fearlessness, for the hospital had always given everything they could to curry favor with Zenith. "Barry Fableman deserves to die," Kiran declared tyrannically. Chapter 98. Barry Fableman deserved to die. Kiran's words echoed in the hospital corridor, stunning everyone. Zenith felt a chill creep into his heart. The memory of Kiran's killing spree the previous night was still vivid in his mind. Helena flew into a rage. "You are the one who—" She did not finish, for Zenith clamped a hand over her mouth. They could not afford to offend Kiran. If she continued screaming, Kiran might kill all of them in a fit of anger. Helena calmed down and glared at Kiran viciously, wrath and hatred surging within her. "Mr. Fableman, I've brought the healing elder with me, just when the atmosphere was getting a little too stifling due to the standoff between them." A young man's excited voice came from the other end of the corridor. Zenith's eyes lit up when he heard the healing elder's name, as if he could picture his son's rebirth. With renewed joy on his face, he headed in the direction of the voice. Kiran looked in that direction as well, only to see an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion, wearing a cassock and black espadrilles, sauntering toward them. He emanated a natural authoritative air, which made him appear quite intimidating. However, it was the scent of perfume on him that piqued Kiran's curiosity. He sniffed lightly and could not help but frown. This old man was a master of poisons. He was using perfume to cover up the stench of poison on his body. Kiran was greatly astounded. Bayville was truly a place packed with hidden experts. To men, Serena's black nails were sexy and alluring, but they were actually loaded with poison. In other words, if she wanted to kill someone, that person would die without knowing it. The healing elder had lethal poison hidden on him, too. Were both of them related? This was getting very interesting. "Please save my son, elder. His limbs are broken, and he's been in a coma for more than 10 hours, Zenith beseeched him tearfully, though he did not dare mention Kiran's name. "That long? I'm afraid it's too late for him." The elder shook his head, a troubled look on his face. Zenith hastily produced a $10 million check. "Please, elder. If you can heal him, I'll give you another $50 million. "Well," the elder seemed conflicted. "Please accept this token of sincerity from us, elder," Helena chimed in. "To doctors, patients are like children. Of course, it's our duty to save them. But if we don't charge money, you won't feel at ease, so I suppose I'll have to accept it." After crapping out a bunch of reasons to justify his receiving the money, the elder tucked the check away in his pocket. glee flashing in his eyes. His words and actions did not escape Kiran's eyes. He was now certain that the healing elder, no matter how superb his medical skills were, was an unethical person who only sought to make money. Zenith and Helena were relieved and overjoyed to see the elder pocket the money. "Our son is in the emergency room. Thank you for your help, elder." "No problem. I promise your son will wake up." The elder glanced around haughtily, his disdain for the hospital's doctors apparent on his face. He marched to the emergency room, opened the door, and frowned at the medical staff bustling about inside. "All of you out." They only gaped at him. "Get out, you useless pieces of trash," Zenith roared. Clatter! After having worked for hours on empty stomachs only to be rewarded with nothing, the staff scurried out with their tails between their legs, not daring to vent their exasperation. The healing elder snickered contemptuously. Next to Kiran, Adrian grimaced in embarrassment and whispered to him, "The healing elder is one of the 3 famous doctors in Bayville. It's said that his medicine can make the dead come alive. It's impossible to request his treatment without paying a high consultation fee." Kiran nodded, slightly surprised. "He doesn't treat more than 10 patients a year, so the Fableman family really went all out today," Adrian added. Zenith and Helena heard his whispers. Hearing Adrian's explanation, Helena glowered at Kiran. "Humph, my son will live, unlike certain people who will die sooner or later. That's enough, don't waste your breath." While Zenith sounded like he was scolding his wife, he was actually implying that Kiran would meet his demise sooner or later. Unfazed, Kiran mulled Adrian's words. The healing elder most definitely used poison to save his patients. Did that mean, "Ah"? Just then, Barry's cries came from inside the emergency room. Chapter 99. "He's awake! Our son's awake!" An ecstatic Helena made a beeline for the door, not forgetting to reproach the medical staff. "You spent hours in there and accomplished nothing," while the elder revived him within a minute. "Useless pigs, all of you!" The medical staff bowed their heads in shame, seething silently. The door to the emergency room opened, and the elder strolled out with a smile on his face. "I have fulfilled my mission. Bring me the check," Zenith shouted, and his subordinate instantly presented him with a $50 million check. Zenith took it, ran over to the elder joyously, and bowed deeply to him while offering up the check with both hands. "Thank you for your miraculous healing, elder." The elder pretended to hesitate before receiving the check with a smile. "My pleasure. As a doctor, I think of all patients as my children. You gave my son a second chance at life, which makes you a parent to him too." Zenith thanked him profusely. Helena pushed Barry's bed out of the emergency room and scowled at the doctors scornfully. "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and continue treating my son. Useless frauds." Despite their resentment, Adrian and the other doctors had no choice but to obey the demands of the Zenith Corporation. Kiran's eyes fell on Barry's face. His complexion should have been pale after he had lost so much blood, but it was now ruddy and full of life. Kiran smirked to himself. Barry was experiencing terminal lucidity, which meant he was nearing his death. Eyeing the healing elder, he thought, "This old fart's not just greedy, but cruel too." Nevertheless, he did not expose the elder. In fact, he was glad. He longed to kill Barry with his own hands, but considering that he was in a law-based society, he refrained from taking action. The elder had done him a favor instead, and he almost wanted to hug and kiss him for that. At that moment, the elevator doors opened and a man rushed out, pushing a hospital bed. Next to him, a middle-aged man whose hair was disheveled from all his running shouted, "Doctor, save my father!" He started throwing up all of a sudden and passed out. Adrian and the other hospital staff felt their heads spin. Why were there so many patients today? He hurried over. The old man's eyes were closed and his face pale, as if he was on his deathbed. However, disgusting mucus and food particles kept trickling out of his mouth. Adrian looked at the middle-aged man anxiously. Had he been poisoned? The man shook his head impatiently. "How am I supposed to know? I'm not a doctor." Adrian was speechless. "Mr. Marshall, what happened to your father?" Since Barry's condition was stable, Zenith asked the middle-aged man. "Mr. Zenith, you're here too?" Only then did Marshal Simmons notice Zenith's presence, but he soon shook his head and said remorsefully, "I don't know either. It just happened out of the blue." "Don't worry, Mr. Marshall. The healing elder here just treated my son. With his help, your father will definitely be cured." Zenith turned to the elder. Mr. Marshall is the CEO of Blooming Group, the largest beauty product manufacturer in Bayville. Zenith's introduction was very detailed, and the elder understood that he was trying to attract new clients for him out of gratitude for saving Barry. However, he pretended to look troubled. After treating your son, I'm afraid I'm... He massaged his hands in a show of exhaustion. Elder, please save my father. The elder's name sparked hope in Marshall, and he was wise enough to bring out a blank check. Money's not the problem. The elder glanced at Zenith. I've already accepted $60 million from Mr. Fableman, much to my shame. I'll give you $100 million. Please, just save my father. Marshall fished out his pen and without hesitation wrote down the amount on the blank check. The elder's eyes shone, but he continued to feign humility. Mr. Marshall, it's really no. Please, I'm begging you. Worried he would decline, Marshall threw himself onto his knees. The elder let an affected trace of surprise appear on his face before exclaiming with emotion. You're a good son, Mr. Marshall. I'm very touched. In this case, I'll help you cure him. With that, he walked toward Marshall's father. Thank you, elder. Marshall scrambled to his feet and stuffed a check into the elder's hands. The elder took it, took out a pill from his pocket and slipped it into Marshall's father's mouth. Just then, Kiran said sharply, Are you trying to kill another person? Chapter 100. Are you trying to kill another person? Everyone was staggered by Kiran's scathing question. The healing elder's outstretched hand stopped in mid-air. He quickly retracted it and fixed Kiran with a sharp stare. Who are you, kid? He's a murderer. He's the one who injured my son. Unable to hold it in anymore, Helena blurted out. He injured your son. The elder looked surprised before sneering. How barbaric. Just ignore him, elder. The most important thing at hand is to treat Mr. Simmons. Zenith was relatively calm. He did not dare provoke Kiran, for he knew how ruthless the man could be. Naturally, Marshall sided with Zenith as the latter had helped introduce him to the elder. He scowled at Kiran. Young man, I've never done anything to you. Why are you doing this? Kiran sniggered and lowered himself into a mock bow. Since you want to let your old man die, I guess I'll just have to stay out of it. Then he stepped aside, ready for the chaos that was about to unfold. He would not have bothered if Marshall had not knelt to the elder and willingly offered up big money just to save his father. He was truly a filial son. However, since he refused to accept Kiran's goodwill, his father's death would be set in stone. You're too cruel for your own good, young man, Marshall berated, then turned to the elder. Please save my father, elder. The elder's sharp gaze flickered to Kiran, only to find that it had no effect on him. Agitated, he glanced at Barry and perceived that the glow on his face was slowly fading. At once, he shoved the check back into Marshall's hands. I'm dropping this case. No, elder, Before Marshall could finish, the elder raced off. Marshall was distressed. Elder, please. However, the old man had already taken to his heels. Marshall stamped his foot. He whirled on Kiran, ready to tear into him. He ran away because he was scared he would be arrested for murder, Kiran said airily. Murder? Marshall's words of anger were swiftly replaced with a puzzled question. Everyone gaped at Kiran in equal bewilderment. Kiran jabbed a finger at Barry on the bed. In 3 minutes, the Fableman family can go home and start planning his funeral. What? Marshall exclaimed. Zenith and Helena blanched and immediately slid their eyes to their son, but his face was still a healthy color. Impossible, Zenith roared. Kiran York, just you wait. When I get better, I'll kill you and make Rain my plaything. Barry had remained quiet at first after his treatment, but when he heard that he was going to die, he burst out angrily. Instead of yelling at me, you should say goodbye to your parents. How tragic it is to see their child die before them. Ha 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 ha. Kiran's manic laughter echoed in the corridor. 20 years ago, the York family had watched helplessly as their loved ones died, unable to save them. Now, 2 decades later, the older members of the 3 prominent families would witness their children's deaths. This alone was sufficient to ease Kiran's hatred, and for this reason, he would orchestrate such tragedies one after another. Mitchell Quinn had been the first. Barry Fableman, who he considered a Ziegler family member, would be next. All these damned bastards would perish. Screw you! I'm not going to believe any of your nonsense, Barry bellowed. Kiran paid no attention to him. It was meaningless to argue with a near-dead person anyway. Furious that he had been ignored, Barry glanced at his mother. "Mom, help me up, till show him that I'm alive and kicking." Helena did not believe Kiran either. How could it be possible when the healing elder had treated Barry with his own hands? Fuming, she helped Barry up while yelling, "My son will live, but you, the last remaining pest of the York family, will meet a terrible death." Sprart. Thick, black blood suddenly gushed out of Barry's nose and mouth like syrup. The rosiness instantly drained from his complexion, just like a flower withering.